Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of 4 1/4 Sports, presented by me, Gregory Richardson, here on Puritans Radio. Today, I've got something very different and very special in store for you as I go back to the future, to the summer of 13, to tell you 31 fun and interesting sports facts to help you to get into the mood for the first British and Irish Lions Tour fixture, which takes place in Australia tomorrow. Granted, their first official fixture was in Dublin last Friday night, but Andy Farrell's men have been in Perth in Australia preparing for their first warm-up fixture this week as they take on the Western Force tomorrow at 11 o'clock British summertime. Just as a reminder, extensive highlights of the match will be available to watch on S4C at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. These fun facts and stats that I share with you over the course of this episode are in no particular order, but I have tried to ensure chronological order between the beginning of April 2013 and the beginning of September that year. However, having said that, if I wanted to maintain the flow of facts from one sport, for example rugby union, and something important that happened at Silverstone in Formula 1 as a Lions test clashed with motorsport, the fun fact about motorsport comes just before the string of rugby facts and stats to ensure a smooth structure of today's feature. Just to clarify, a bit earlier when I said order, I meant in terms of the best and the least best moment. It's just a chronological order to the best of my ability, as I said a moment ago. Right then, without further ado, let's get cracking. So, number 1. On Saturday, 6th April 2013, Rhine Mania won the Grand National on Aurora's Encore, starting at odds of 66-1. Number 2. On Saturday, 11th May, Wigan Athletic won the FA Cup as they defeated Manchester City 1-0 in front of 86,254 people at Wembley Stadium, thanks to Ben Watson's injury time header to seal a dramatic late win. On Saturday, 18th May, Toulon beat Clermont-Auvergne by 16 points to 15 to win the Heineken Cup in front of 50,198 people at the Aviva Stadium in Dublin. It was the first of a hat-trick of Heineken Cups for the Southern French club as they enjoyed having Johnny Wilkinson's experience in their ranks. Number 4. Joe Root scored his maiden Test 100 on Friday, 24th May 2013 at Headingley, so his home ground in the second Investec Test against New Zealand. Fast forward 12 years and the Yorkshireman now has 36 to his name, and he is England's most prolific run scorer in Test matches for England, and he has Sachin Tendulkar's tally in his sights after having gone past former teammate Sir Alistair Cook on Wednesday, 9th October 2024 against Pakistan, when he hit a shot to the boundary to move to 71 in that particular innings. Number 5. On Saturday, 25th May 2013, Leicester Tigers defeated East Midlands rivals Northampton Saints by 37 points to 17 to win the Gallagher Premiership in front of 81,703 people at Twickenham after Dylan Hartley was sent off for swearing at Wayne Barnes in a moment of madness on the stroke of half-time. For those who may not remember the incident, Toby Flood missed a penalty kick as the clock turned red, meaning that Stephen Myler could not just kick the ball out from the 22-metre restart. However, the Saints halfback ignored Wayne Barnes' instructions, so Leicester were rewarded a scrum from which the Saints were penalised, as the England hooker Dylan Hartley used some choice words, which meant that at the time he became the first ever player to see red mist in the Premiership final. On Saturday, 25th May that year, In an all-German Champions League final, Bayern Munich beat Borussia Dortmund 2-1 at Wembley Stadium in London in front of 86,298 people. At the end of May, Manchester United were crowned 2013 Premier League champions. They have not won the title since, as their Manchester rivals, so Manchester City, have since dominated England's top flight as the tide turned in Manchester. Moving on then to number 8, and Serena Williams beat Maria Sharapova 6-4, 6-4 to win straight sets in the ladies' singles final of Roland Garros. Sticking with Roland Garros, and Rafael Nadal beat David Ferrer to win the men's singles final 6-3, 6-2, 6-3, so also in straight sets. Right then, we move on to number 10, and on Saturday, the 22nd June, Queen's Estimate won the Gold Cup at Royal Ascot. Ridden by Ryan Moore, the Queen's Estimate became the first horse owned by a reigning monarch to win the famous race. At number 11, Andy Murray triumphed at Queen's Club 5-7, 7-5, 6-3 to win by 2-1 as he defeated the defending champion Marin Cilic, meaning that the Scot became the first British player to win 3 titles at Queen's Club since Arthur Lowe in the 1920s. In rugby speak now, we move into the centres, and at number 12 in Formula 1, Nico Rosberg triumphed at Silverstone, and the overall winner of the Tour in 2013 was Sebastian Vettel. At outside centre then, number 13, the British and Irish Lions won the first test of the 2013 series against Australia on Saturday, 22nd June at the Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane by 23 points to 21 as a last gasp penalty attempt from Kurtley Beale fell a long way short from the halfway line after the Australian slipped in his kicking stride. It was the last of several kicks that the Wallabies missed that day as James O'Connor seemingly forgot his kicking boots, and they were made to pay for it as Lee Halfpenny was on song. On the right wing then, and number 14 in the second test, with the series on a knife edge, George North picked up Israel Folau and threw him over his shoulder when carrying the ball forward in contact in an iconic, spine-tingling piece of Lions folklore history. It still gives me goosebumps. That was an incredible moment. And as I remember it, the ball was bobbling around on the ground as the Lions were trying to distribute it to the wingers, and George North picked the ball up. Braced for contact, North then attempted to sidestep the former rugby league star, but the centre did not give in. In response, North simply bent himself at the waist and nonchalantly swung Israel Folau over his shoulder and drove forward, and Israel Folau made a thudding contact with the ground as they both came to a shuddering halt. What a moment in the series, and what a player George North was for both Wales and the British and Irish Lions at his peak. At fullback then, so Lee Halfpenny's position for the tour, and at number 15, Australia fortuitously clinched the second test on Saturday, 29th June at the Etihad Stadium in Melbourne as a last gasp Lee Halfpenny penalty kick fell just short in the last play of the game in a role reversal from a week earlier. Full time in that match was 16 points to 15 to the hosts. Both Halfpenny and Beale had now suffered the same heartbreak off the tee 7 days apart, and funnily enough, both Halfpenny and Beale are fullbacks, or were fullbacks. In 2013 then, there was to be a crucial third test decider. Incredible. What drama. Number 16 then, so we're onto the bench. Replacement hooker is number 16 in rugby, and the Welsh players had a massive impact in the third test after Irish legend Brian O'Driscoll was controversially dropped from the matchday squad. That day then, on Saturday, 6th July 2013, the British and Irish Lions run out winners by 41 points to 16 to clinch the series 2-1 at the ANZ Stadium in Sydney, which means that Andy Farrell, the coach this year, has an idea of what it takes and how it feels to beat the Wallabies down under. That day, the British and Irish Lions won their first Test series overseas on tour for 16 years, and you could see what it meant to the players and coaching staff alike. What a belter of a rugby union series, and what a dominant performance from the British and Irish Lions that day. At number 17, Lee Halfpenny was voted Player of the Series after scoring 49 points across the 3 Test matches against Australia, thus beating the previous record of 41 set by fellow Welshman and kicking coach Neil Jenkins in South Africa in 1997. As aforementioned, 1997 was the last time any Lions team had won an overseas series. Moving on, 12 years later, and in 2025, the last time the Lions won a Test series on tour was this very one in 2013 in Australia that we are talking about now. Can the Lions then win back-to-back series in Australia? Well, we'll have to wait and see to find out. Moving on to number 18 then, and in the ladies' final of Wimbledon, Marion Bartoli beat Sabine Lisicki in straight sets 6-1, 6-4 to be crowned champion. And at number 19, also at Wimbledon, 1 year after his heartbreaking 3-1 defeat against Swiss player Roger Federer on centre court, Andy Murray came back to triumph in the men's singles final in straight sets 6-4, 7-5, 6-4 to beat Novak Djokovic in 3 hours and 9 minutes to become the first British player to win Wimbledon since 1936. What a game that was. That was dramatic right to the end. At number 20, and in the Women's Rugby League World Cup final, Australia beat New Zealand by 22 points to 12 at Headingley to become world champions. At number 21, Alistair Cook, so England's highest run scorer down under in Australia in 2010-2011, managed a high score of just 62 in the first innings of the Old Trafford Test in the 2013 Ashes series, and 3 half-centuries overall as Chef, as he was known, was starved of centuries between his 130 scored at Headingley against New Zealand earlier that year and his 105 against West Indies in 2015, as the Essex player went 35 Test innings without a century. Although Cook did manage to save his place for the second time in his career with a spirited 95 against India at the Ageas Bowl on Sunday, 27th July 2014, on day 1 of the 3rd Investec Test of that series. At number 22, so sticking with cricket for the time being, and Joe Root, yes, that man again, posted his maiden score of 150 or more runs in an innings in Test cricket, with his match-winning 180 at Lord's in the 2nd Investec Ashes Test at the home of cricket. On the Friday of that test, the Yorkshireman had a huge slice of luck when neither the wicketkeeper nor first slip reacted to his edge when he was still in single figures. On Saturday, 20th July, so the next day, he batted out the day to reach 178 not out as he became the youngest Ashes centurion at Lord's at 22 years and 202 days. On the Sunday, so the 21st July, Root was out early when attempting a scoop shot, but that was definitely a standout innings of that series. Just in case you're interested, it took Joe Root until the following summer to score his maiden double hundred, and he did so at the same ground as where he passed 150 for the first time, which is very interesting. If you follow Joe Root's career, you will see that he really does love batting at Lords. On to number 23 then, and Ashton Agar, making his Test debut for Australia, made a record-breaking 98 as the number 11 batsman, beating the previous highest score of 95 made by Tino Best, also against England in 2012, so the year previous to that. Batting with Phil Hughes, Ashton Agar also helped Australia to break the record for the highest ever last wicket partnership at that time, as the two batsmen put on 163 runs together for Australia's 10th wicket. At number 24, and Stuart Broad got away with edging the ball when on 37, as Australia and Michael Clarke had used up all of their reviews, and the umpire of that test match, Alim Dar, gave him not out at Trent Bridge. Consequently, Stuart Broad ended up scoring 28 more runs in a crucial 138-run partnership with Ian Bell. Just in case you have forgotten, England ended up winning that test match by just 14 runs. So that incident was massive in the series, and it was a big talking point thereafter. At number 25, and Jimmy Anderson's 10-wicket haul at Trent Bridge got England off to a brilliant start in the first Investec Test that summer. Anderson's exact match figures were 10 wickets for 158 runs off his bowling, and he grabbed Brad Haddin with a thin edge after his fellow bowler's controversial decision not to walk in England's second innings in Nottingham. England won that test, and it gave them momentum going forwards from there. That series there really were some shocking DRS decisions, it has to be said. At number 26, and the women's Ashes were taking place simultaneously to the men's, and the only test in the women's series was drawn. The test match for the women's Ashes was played between the 11th and 14th August in Wormsley. Both countries had a first innings centurion, with Sarah Elliott scoring 104 for Australia and Heather Knight responded with 157 for the hosts. It is also worth noting that no bowlers got a fifer, although Erin Osborne got close to one for the tourists with her 4 for 67, as England were bowled out for 314 in reply to England's 331 for 6. At number 27, and Stuart Broad recorded the best bowling figures of the series with 6 runs for 50 wickets in the second innings at Chester Street in Durham. With Australia on 100-odd for 0 and England staring down the barrel of a defeat which would have reduced the gap in the series to 2-1, Stuart Broad produced one of his magical spells to turn the game on its head, as England eventually won by 74 runs in an incredible turn of events, as the Notts bowler was then elected as player of the match for his crucial contribution. Next then, and Ian Bell scored 562 runs across the 5 tests against Australia that summer at an average of 62.44 in the most prolific series of his career, as he posted 3 centuries. Scores of 109 at both Trent Bridge and Lords in the first 2 tests enabled England to win those tests respectively. The Warwickshire batsman also scored 113 at Chester Street in Durham in the second innings of the 4th Investec Test, which enabled England to clinch the series 3-0, thanks to Stuart Broad's contribution with the ball that I mentioned a moment ago. Moving on then, and we're on number 29, and on Saturday, 24th August, Wigan Warriors beat Hull FC in the Tetley T Challenge Cup final by 16 points to 0 in front of 78,137 people at Wembley Stadium. Therefore, in 12 years, the attendance for Rugby League's big day out in London has dropped by 14,859 and a whopping 19%, so nearly 1/5, as inflation is seemingly impacting accessibility of the event for Northerners. Debate around venues for future finals continues, although the Rugby Football League, so the RFL, have confirmed that the Betfred Challenge Cup final will be staged at Wembley again on Saturday, 30th May 2026. Now then, number 30, so the penultimate fact for today's show, and on Sunday, 8th September 2013, Serena Williams clinched the ladies' final of the US Open on home soil with a win over arch-rival Victoria Azarenka by 2-1, winning the sets 7-5, 6-7, 6-1 en route to victory. And last but not least, number 31, and on Monday, 9th September 2013, Rafael Nadal won the men's US Open by beating Novak Djokovic by 3-1, winning those sets 6-2, 3-6, 6-4, 6-1, en route to his victory. And with that 31st and final fact, that brings to an end the best bits from a captivating summer of British and Irish sport from 12 years ago, as well as interesting facts involving sports people from other countries. All that is left for me to do now then is to wish Andy Farrell and his Lions the best of luck ahead of their campaign in Australia. 2013 was a successful tour, and despite the Lions' devastating 4-point loss to Rugby World Cup 2023 semi-finalists Argentina a week ago, this promises to be a successful tour, but I will present a full preview of the test series on Friday, 18th July, ahead of the first test against Australia, scheduled for Saturday, 19th July. Before then, however, I would like to remind you of the full Lions Tour schedule, just in case you cannot access it online. Initially then, just for your information, all matches are scheduled to start at 11 a.m. British Summer Time. In addition, just before I start, I hope that you have a pen and a notepad at the ready to write down these key days and dates. So, without further ado then, tomorrow it is the Western Force against the Lions at the Optus Stadium in Perth. Then, on Wednesday, 2nd July, it is the Queensland Reds against the Lions at the Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane. On Saturday, 5th July, it is the New South Wales Waratahs against the Lions at the Allianz Stadium in Sydney. And moving on then to Wednesday, 9th July, when it is the ACT Brumbies against the Lions at the GIO Stadium in the capital, so Canberra. Because, as I always got reminded, Canberra is the capital of Australia and not Sydney, just in case you need a little reminder. And after that then comes the fun stuff, because on Saturday, 12th July, it is the Invitational Australia and New Zealand 15 against the Lions at the Adelaide Oval in Adelaide, and then there will be a 1-week gap before the first test of the series against Australia. Just as a reminder then, the tests are played across 3 consecutive Saturdays between 19th July and 2nd August. However, between the first and second test, so on Tuesday, 22nd July, the Lions will play against the First Nations Pacifica 15 at the Marvel Stadium in Melbourne. So, there we have it. There is a rugby feast to come for all British and Irish Lions fans, as well as any Australians who may be living nearby or on British and Irish territory. For now though, thank you very much for listening to me, Gregory Richardson, once again here on Puritans Radio. I hope that you have enjoyed today's special episode of 4 1/4 Sports, but for now, it is time for me to hand you back to Ian Fleming for the rest of today's 007 Magazine Show Live. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you soon. Take care and bye-bye.